Hi, everybody. I hope everybody's doing well. I hope they're doing good on this Wednesday. I'm coming with a new blog about boundaries. I've been doing this series on boundaries, and I'm loving doing the series. And I hope that people are gaining something from learning about boundaries and what they are and things like that, and kind of what they are, how they work, and things like that. But today I'm going to be talking about the boundaryless and boundary busters. And what essentially I'm going to be talking about is boundary problems. People who have boundary problems and who they are and stuff. And of course, I'm taking this from my book, Boundaries. There we go. By Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend. And I love this book, and I just bought the book Boundaries for Marriage, Boundaries in Marriage, which I think is great. And of course, like I say, there's a whole series of books, Boundaries for your kids, Boundaries in work, Boundaries in dating, all these things that need boundaries and stuff. So I think it's really good if you're having issues in any of those areas regarding boundaries, or you just want to kind of figure out what boundaries are and how they work, if you got them, or if you want to make them better and stuff. This is a good way to do it. And so today we're going to talk about the boundaryless and boundary busters. And there are, several types of people that have issues regarding boundaries. And today we're just going to do kind of a little overview about who they are. I'm going to be taking stuff, you know, just from the book, really. And, so one of the first types of people that have boundary problems are people called compliance. And what compliance do is they say yes to the bad. Remember, when we talk about boundaries, it's about saying yes to the good and no to the bad. But with compliance, they say yes to the bad. What compliance have is they have a problem with saying no to people, and they feel guilty. They feel like they will get repercussions. They feel like maybe people won't love them and will turn back from them, and stuff. And so they say yes to everything when they shouldn't. There are things that they should say no to, but they don't. And, it's really sort of weird, but I'm sure you may have come across a compliant person. You may be a compliant person yourself where you don't say no when you should. So, their boundary conflict is called compliance, and I'll read about what it is. Compliant people have fuzzy and indistinct boundaries. They melt into demands and the needs of other people. They can't stand alone, distinct from people who want something from them. Compliance, for example, pretend to like the same restaurants and movies their friends do just to get along, and they're go along people to get along. They minimize their differences with others so as not to rock the boat. Compliance are chameleons. After a while, it's hard to distinguish them from their environment. The inability to say no to bad is pervasive. Not only does it keep us from refusing evil in our lives, it often keeps us from recognizing evil. And many compliant people realize too late that they're in a dangerous or abusive relationship. Their spiritual or emotional radar is broken, and they have no ability to guard their hearts. There's a reason they have a problem, or they don't have really boundary muscles, any boundaries for good stuff. Um, Whenever they need to protect themselves by saying no, usually the words just sort of catch in their throat. This happens for a number of reasons: the fear of hurting another person's feelings, the fear of abandonment or separateness, a wish to be totally dependent on another, the fear of someone else's anger, the fear of punishment, the fear of being shamed, the fear of being seen as a bad or selfish person, the fear of being unspiritual, the fear of one's over restrictive or critical conscience. So those are all reasons that compliance do what they do. And you have to know, if you're a compliant person, that you have to be careful, especially about the part about not recognizing evil. There are so many, and I've done this series and this whole thing, this blog is specifically for it's for women, but it's really geared specifically for Black women who seem to have a really hard time recognizing evil, and stuff. We have a hard time doing that. We have a hard time recognizing things that are bad for us, and we will participate in the things that are against us. We will participate in those. We will give people excuses for those and stuff like that. And you have to be careful because you have to recognize evil. You cannot participate in it. It's not good for your soul, not good for your spirit. It takes away from who you are, and it usually makes you codependent, being a compliant. So you have to be careful about those things. The next person I'm going to talk about is the avoidant. The avoidant is good at saying no to good things. So they say no to all the good and stuff. They're on the other side of the compliant. Now there are people, and we'll talk about in a few minutes, that are called avoidant compliant. So there's a whole nother group of people. So the boundary is called avoidance. Saying no to the good is the inability to ask for help, to recognize one's own needs, to let others in. Avoidance withdraw when they are in need. They do not ask for the support of others. Why is avoidance a boundary problem? At the heart of the struggle is the confusion of boundaries as walls. Boundaries are supposed to be able to breathe, to be like fences with a gate that can let the good in and the bad out. Individuals with walls for boundaries can let in neither bad or good. No one touches them. God designed our personal boundaries to have gates. We should have the freedom to enjoy safe relationships and to avoid destructive ones. Okay? And you have to remember that you can't be avoidant. You have to let people in, which is another issue I see with some Black women. There's an issue I had myself for a long time about not asking for help, and stuff, and being kind of bound in myself to help myself, to kind of keep people away and stuff. And it really hurt me badly. And when I realized that I was hurt by putting up walls and not letting people in and not asking people for help, and stuff, then I was like, okay, it's time to take this stuff down. It's time to start asking for help and for aid when I need it. It's enough, Black women and the strong Black woman May that has been going on forever and ever. Now, nothing's wrong with having strength or being a strong woman or a strong person, and stuff. But having strength also means that you have to be able to recognize when you have weakness and stuff, and when you do need help. And so if you don't recognize when you have weakness, all you just end up is being isolated and stuff and in pain usually. And those people are usually resentful and they're bitter and they're angry because of this strong woman thing, and stuff. And it's enough of that. You need some help. You need some aid sometimes. And you have to sometimes ask people for help or find people to trust in a relationship to have healthy relationships, so you can get the help and the support that you need. I'm not alone in this world. I ask for help. I don't avoid help and stuff, I ask for the things that I need. And I stopped trying to be an avoider and avoiding asking for help and asking people for aid and all that stuff. That was not going to help me at all. And so it's important for you to understand if this may be some kind of boundary problem for you. Now there's another type of person, and we're going to call these people were boundaryless, but we're going to call these people the boundary busters. Controller. Your controller does not respect other people's boundaries. Oh boy. So, the boundary problem of control. Controllers can't respect others' limits. They resist taking responsibility for their own lives. So they need to control others. Some of this sounds so familiar to me in the dynamic when I see some of the dynamic between black women and black men. Controllers believe the old jokes about training top salespeople. No means maybe, and maybe means yes. While this may be productive in learning to sell a product, it can wreak havoc on a relationship. Controllers are perceived as bullies, manipulative, and aggressive. The prime problem of individuals who can't hear no, which is different from not being able to say no, is that they tend to project responsibility for their lives onto others. They use various means to control to motivate others to carry out the load intended by God to be theirs alone. Remember when I talked about boulders and knapsacks, and they're coming back to that, and I talked about boulders and knapsacks from the example in this book. Controllers look for someone to carry their knapsacks, their individual responsibilities. In addition to their boulders, they want you to help them in crisis too. So they're not only looking for you to take on responsibility for their little stuff, they're looking for you to take on responsibility for all the big stuff, for everything and stuff. There are two types of controllers. The aggressive controllers. These people clearly don't listen to others' boundaries. They run over other people's fences like a tank. They are sometimes verbally abusive, sometimes physically abusive, but most of the time they simply aren't aware of others, that others even have boundaries. It's as if they live in a world of yes. There's no place for someone else's no. They attempt to get others to change, to make the world fit their idea of the way life should be. They neglect their own responsibility to accept others as they are. The manipulative controller, less honest than the aggressive controller, manipulators try to persuade people out of their boundaries. They talk others into a yes. They indirectly manipulate circumstances to get their way. They seduce others into carrying their burdens, and they use guilt messages. So you have to remember that about your aggressive and manipulative controllers. I have known people who are aggressive controllers, and I have known people who are manipulative controllers. Manipulative controllers are much more subtle. My ex-husband was a manipulative controller and stuff, and it is sometimes very hard. You're usually, if you're a person that might be guilt ridden, as I was in that marriage most of the time, then you end up doing all sorts of stuff you aren't supposed to do, and carrying burdens for someone who should be carrying their own burdens and doing stuff to help themselves, and stuff. So you have to know all this. You have to remember all this when you're looking toward people, or when you're in relationships with people, or when you're a person that has no boundaries or have boundary issues. Are you ending up, with a controlling person? Because avoidance and controllers, boy, they can really flock to each other. I mean, they're really, they can really, end up, yeah, because avoidance don't want to say no. Controllers don't want nobody to say no. So why don't we just end up in some kind of, friendship, relationship, or whatever with one another? It's really easy. Um, Believe it or not, compliance and avoidance can also be controllers. They tend, however, to be more manipulative than aggressive. When compliant avoidants need emotional support, for example, they may do a favor for a friend. They hope that being loving, they'll receive love. So then they wait, anticipating the return of the favor, and sometimes they wait for years, and especially if they perform the favor for someone who can't read minds. What's wrong with this? It's not a picture of love. When you give to people out of love, you're not expecting for things in return. When you give to people out of unconditional love, you're not expecting for stuff. You're not expecting to get anything back, even if that is validation for yourself. You're not really the expectation is really not that. Now, it's great if they do, but if the only reason you're giving is to get, then you're not really giving. You're trying to manipulate. Non-responsive is another type of boundary buster, and they just don't even hear other people's needs at all. Okay, they just could care less. Termed non-responsive because of their lack of attention to responsibilities of love. These individuals exhibit the opposite pattern. Um, exhorted in Proverbs, and I'm going to talk about Proverbs 3:27. Do not withhold good from those to whom it is due. When it is in your power to do it. It's you have to you have to be responsible. You're responsible to help, to care, and to help people within certain limits. Others whom God placed in your life, you're responsible to help people within certain limits. The people that are placed in your life, but to refuse to do so when you have the appropriate resources to do it can be a boundary conflict. Non-responsive people fall into two groups: those with a critical spirit toward others' needs, a projection of their own hatred of our needs onto others. You know, they hate being incomplete in themselves. As a result, they ignore the needs in other people. Those who are absorbed in their own desires and needs, and they exclude others, which is a form of narcissism. Don't confuse this self-absorption with a God-given sense of taking responsibility for one's own needs first, first, so that one is able to have others. Okay, God wants us to take care of ourselves so we can help others without moving into crisis ourselves, without having it become a narcissistic thing. And you can tell the difference between narcissism and between somebody taking care of themselves. I mean, narcissism is just really all about you. You could care less if anybody has needs. You can care less if anybody's in distress. You could care less if anybody is really needs some help. Now, it's a difference between somebody needing help and somebody, who has made a situation really bad for themselves, but they won't do anything different to make a situation better for themselves. There's a difference between the two, and you have to know the difference, and stuff. And so if you know the difference between helping somebody who actually has an actual need, a burden, and helping somebody with a knapsack also. But you also know the difference between you being narcissistic and just thinking totally about yourself and not even considering other people, even when they have a really desperate and dire need and stuff. So, controlling non-responsives have a hard time looking past themselves. They see others as responsible for their struggles and are on the lookout for someone to take care of them. That's what they're looking for. They gravitate towards someone with blurry boundaries who will naturally take on too many responsibilities in the relationships and who won't complain about it. And that's you have to understand that controllers and non-responsives usually are people that are gravitating toward one another because they're both people, one boundaryless and one a boundary buster. And so it's really easy for them to come into relationships with one another. Remember about my warnings about codependency and stuff, making other people responsible for who you are and your feelings about yourself and how you see yourself, putting that all on another person, and stuff. And both boundaryless and boundary buster people can do that, you know, and stuff. So you have to be really careful. It's, I mean, you know, it's there's boundaries that we have to have in our lives. We have to make sure that we're keeping those boundaries, the healthy boundaries. We're keeping those up and we're growing those with people. If you're a person who's boundaryless or a boundary buster, you need help. You need help, and you need help to figure out, how did this happen? How do I get some boundaries? How do I do what it is that I need to do to be able to let good in and let bad out? I'm reading parts of this book because I want people to know what boundaries are and how important they are to your mental health, even physical health, because the stress of not having boundaries does not just go with mental health, it goes with physical health and stuff, or even being a boundary buster. It's this stress. It's not taking care of yourself because you put that on somebody else as a controller or as non-responsive, and stuff, or it's taking care of too much things that aren't yours to take care of because you're avoidant, or you're avoidant, or you're a control, and stuff. It's it's on you. You're avoidant or compliant. I'm sorry. It's on you. And stuff. It's on you to figure out what you're going to be willing to take in and not take in. It's on you. You can't wait for everybody else to kind of get it right so you don't have to say no. You have to do the work yourself, and if you're a boundaryless or a boundary buster, like I say always on this blog, hey, nobody has to tell me anything, but don't lie to yourself, okay? Because you're not helping yourself. If you're a boundaryless or a boundary buster, you need some help, and you need to get it. You need to think about what it is that you're doing and how you're hurting yourself, and you may be hurting others, and stuff, but definitely hurting yourself. It's not okay to be like this. It's not okay. You can be healthy. You can be healthy and have healthy boundaries. And you could be not codependent on other people, or trying to control other people, or trying to make sure you're making everybody happy, because you don't feel good about yourself. You know, Whatever it is, you can get some help for it. So next week we're going to be talking about um, the laws of boundaries, and a little bit about how boundaries are developed and stuff. How you get those things, how they come about or don't come about. And some laws of boundaries. I'm looking forward to the remainder of this series. It's probably going to be a long one, but I'm looking forward to sharing all of this information with you. I hope it's helpful, and I hope you learn something, and I hope it gives you something to think about, or even if you want to go buy the book and read it yourself, and stuff. I hope you enjoy it, and I'll talk to you all later on, okay, this week. Hope you're having a good day and have a good rest of your evening. Bye bye.